Welcome to Living Well with Rentwell,
the podcast for anybody who's thinking about getting into real estate,
and wants to take their game to the next level. I'm your co-host, TJ Hawk.
And I am your co-host, RColdwell.
So I am here to teach a bit of a masterclass, but also just like break it down and keep it simple. I really enjoy redevelopment. I am team human. I want these areas to improve. And one of the ways to do that is to take the old dilapidated housing or the building lots and bring them back to life, which takes significant capital and is significant risk. Qualified opportunity zones give you an added benefit on really taxes. So this whole thing really comes down to paperwork and then just knowing how you qualify, because it's all self-reporting. So we'll get into it. Yeah, what if your next deal was 30% better because you filed some paperwork? Like, how nice would that be if you could just be like, and just ChatGPT, like, just make it 30% better? Like, what would that do? Like, oh, that would make a lot of more deals pencil. I have personally done a few of these. We're going to look at some real life examples, and then at the end, I'm going to show you, like, there are some things of what not to do, so you can't just go out and set this thing up by yourself. Yeah, IRS is absolutely a silent partner, as are all the other taxes and fees that we are charged as landlords. This is a government incentive for business investment. It is not just real estate. So a lot of people think QOZ is real estate, but it's also businesses. Yes, you have a question?
So nonprofits can't do this?
That's a great question. I'm not sure the answer of a nonprofit, but what it comes down to is a long holding period, selling the business. So the question was, can nonprofits benefit from this? If nonprofits aren't already paying taxes, I'm not an expert at how that works, but this is for profit, and it's at a long duration period, and we'll get into it. So maybe at the end it'll help to answer it, or we can always ask ChatGPT and see what it says. Yeah. So formal, like, I'm not a CPA, I'm not an attorney. I had one, and the same put together my legal structure, and my CPA keeps up with it because there's a lot of things for compliance. It does get a little complex, especially once you start to use more and more of the benefits. I'm a licensed general contractor, I'm a licensed real estate agent, and I've been a landlord for 20 years and managed other people's real estate for 15. So that's my expertise. So what we're focusing on is the real estate side of the business, right? So if I wanted to get fancy, I could put a Rentwell property management in downtown Coatesville and then hire people locally, right? So that's how they look at for the business. It's not so much where it's located, right? It needs to be located in a region, but then how many people do you bring to work that live in that region? That's more of the business side. I know enough about that, but I haven't done that. Everything I share is from my own direct experience. So on the left, Royersford Commons, good buddy of mine built that. It's over 80 units, it's brand new, it's in Royersford. Royersford's not a qualified opportunity zone, okay? On the right, that's my foreman right there. That is in Coatesville. That is absolutely something that you would think of if you walk into a building and you're like, yeah, we're gonna have to rebuild this entire subfloor. We're gonna need major CapEx. Start to think qualified opportunity zone. Okay, so number one is geography. Number two, what you're gonna see is it's how much money are you improving upon the building. Just because you buy it in a zone, like my first one that I bought was my office building in Clifton Heights, which is a QOZ, and I did double the basis, but I didn't do the legal paperwork on the back end, so I can feel the pain. Yeah. All right, and then nice picture of Coatesville there. So if this was a row, and then you have one really rundown property, that's the one that you would want to hone in on. All right. This is a high level of how we've structured ours. So we own the fund, my business partner and I, and then the fund funds the entity, the LLC, that owns the real estate. So underneath here, it would be the real estate. And then that 0.5% basically allows us to have control and figure out similar, I think, to how trusts are set up, right? So what ends up flowing is the money needs to go into the fund, and then the fund puts it into the property. Yes, Bobby.
Rob, I think my understanding is correct. To establish the fund, so that the top left, you have to have a capital gain to fund that fund. Is that true?
Yeah. So the question is, do you have to fund the fund with a capital gain? You don't have to, but there is a short-term tax deferment if you do. So let's say you sell a property and you have depreciated the properties. We're going to talk about depreciation today to really understand how it works. We're also going to talk about how are you taxed, right? Because that's why you have depreciation, because there's certain things that you expense, but they have to get rolled out over time. It's called being amortized. So we did have some gains that we put into the fund. We also took on debt at the entity level, and that allowed us to do some of the projects, and we've put money separately into the fund that wasn't a capital gain. So where most people get tripped up is thinking, well, I don't have a gain, I don't want to sell anything. Doesn't disqualify you. It's geography first, doubling the basis of the property second, and most importantly that you set up the legal structure to begin with. And we'll get into that. Cool? Okay. Yes?
I apologize.
Yeah, it's good.
Could you go back to the
Sure.
slide before? So
Sure.
which of those entities benefits from the QOZ stuff?
Ultimately, it's going to flow through to my personal tax returns. But this entity owns it.
Right?
Right? And then as we file a return with the entity and with the QOZ to make sure we stay in compliance.
Right.
Then ultimately when we exit is by doing all the paperwork, that's our proof that we remained in compliance and that there's no capital gain when we sell this property. So imagine selling a property and not having a federal capital gain to pay. Imagine selling a property and not having add back on your depreciation.
So then the lower level LLC doesn't have, or are you saying it just somehow gets caught between the funds and never makes it to you? The capital gain.
So let's say he owned $1 million worth of property in Chester County.
Right?
10 years from now, he sells it. Let's say he owes nothing.
Yeah.
He earns $1 million tax-free.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Whether it's from here to here or there, like big picture is it's not due.
So Chester
I
County
was just
LLC.
curious, like, which
It's
of
like a
those?
Roth IRA for property.
Yeah, and it's basically like doing a 1031,
Yeah.
but not having to find a replacement property and you actually get to keep the money.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you and TJ both, so 50%, you both have to contribute evenly?
Yes.
To each of them, is what I'm saying. Sorry, my eyes are
Yep,
getting
keep it. We own, that's the equity position. So he could put in more or less, but we have the equity in the same.
Okay, but if you're doing it as without TJ, you can do it without TJ.
Yeah, I think there are some rules that you have to have maybe one other partner in some of this. That yes, I believe so.
Interesting. Okay.
And Chester County Redevelopment LLC is only, it's just a solo LLC, like it's not any special LLC.
Nope, it's just a normal
The
one.
OZ fund is
That's right.
qualified, so that one files the K1, the OZ one.
Yeah, they both do.
They both file.
They're both filing a K1. This can get a mortgage. This can have a rental license, right? It can get more complicated where you can have a certain amount of non-qualified assets and qualified assets, and that's like some next level stuff. And then there's ratios. I'm going to get into some of that like towards the end as to what doesn't qualify, because some of this can get kicked out if you don't qualify it. There's penalties if you don't invest the money fast enough, especially on the deferred portion. So if you have that $100,000 gain, do you want to pay taxes on it this year or in 3 years? 3 years, right? Time value of money. So you want to defer that initial gain on the separate real estate transaction, and then you can put that in the fund, but you have to deploy that capital in a certain period of time. So they've thought through a lot because they don't want to have fraud. They don't want to say, I'm going to put my gain into my fund. 3 years later, I never found a property. Okay, I'll pay my taxes now. No. You get penalized for that. Cool? Okay, so the tax deferral is the portion that goes from some other entity that you sold. And I am happy to share the presentation with anybody that wants it. My email is rob@rentwell.com. Happy to share it. PDF it, share it with you. Okay, the step-up basis. So gains invested for more than 5 years get a 10 to 15% basis increase. So sometimes you don't maybe want to hold it for 10 years. My personal plan, and I have a calendar reminder set, I am 10 years in 1 day, right? Because that's where I'm going to have the most amount of benefit from this hold. The appreciation, right? So after holding for 10 years, all future appreciation and depreciation recapture are federally tax-free.
No recapture.
It's huge. There's no recapture.
That's great.
Huge. So now you have to exit within year 30. So it's interesting. They've given you a window here, which if you think about 30 years, that's when all the depreciation's up anyway.
Yeah, so why not?
Okay. Accelerated, I recommend doing, because the depreciation, you won't have a recapture on it, I recommend accelerating it. We'll talk about what that means. You have to cost seg it, and then you accelerate it. And we'll go through those examples. And then I genuinely believe, again, Team Human, I want to take the worst building on the street, and I want everybody else to pick up all the others, and I want to raise the vibe. Like literally raise the vibe. Like clean things up, pressure wash things, get new in there, nice landscaping, the whole nine. Yeah, great. Okay, 300 qualified opportunity zones are in Pennsylvania. 76 Royal Opportunity Zones. And from this QR code, you can go onto a federal website, type in an address, and see if you qualify. You might be on the wrong side of the street. So it is hyper localized. And what qualified a few years ago may not qualify now. What didn't qualify a few years ago might qualify now. So check out that QR code.
So rural areas are considered QOZs as well as like
That's right.
metropolis-y type areas.
Yeah, it's where they want to give this almost unfair advantage. It's like you're a real estate developer and you don't have recapture or capital gains. Well, how much does a 10-unit building cost if you build it in, let's pick an opportunity zone, Reading? Okay, well, it's going to cost the same amount of money to actually develop it as it did in one of the nicest areas in Pennsylvania. So like the construction remains about the same. The land is different, right? But the rents are also different. So this is an advantage to say, developers, come to this area. Here's the advantage that you're getting there. Now what you have to weigh that is on appreciation. So you may not get the same level of appreciation in a QOZ area that you would in already, Now for all of us that are first generation real estate investors, we're willing to roll up our sleeves a little bit more, maybe take a little bit more risk, right? A little bit more sweat equity. Okay. It's in our backyard: Coatesville, Pottstown, Norristown, City of Chester, Reading, Lancaster, Wilmington, Camden, and Trenton. Some of these, like specifically Wilmington, has funds available for you for like a lot of historical tax credits and grants. You can start layering on those. Oh. Okay. So high level is if you had another asset or a business that generated a capital gain and then you put it into your QOZ fund, or you just fund the fund with your own monies. Then you purchase a property, you improve the property, you hold on to the property, that's the key, right? It starts to really get sexy at about 7-year hold, and then it's like basically fully vest, if you want to look at it that way, at 10 years. So you're in it for a while. Yeah. All right. So my businesses are 3. They act in a trifecta. One is an investment company. We do consulting there, and we help to set all these things up, right? Do advisory services. And then we also are a general contractor, and we're the longest standing business is Rentwell, which is like professional property management, leasing, managing, maintaining. The first step is to identify the right property, making sure it's located inside of a QOZ. So it's the first thing that I'm looking for. Then you set up your fund, then you have to make your purchase, right? Then the key is you have to double your basis in the property. So if you bought $1 million property, when you get it appraised, very important, the appraiser is not going to say how much is land and how much is building. Your tax preparer usually says, well, 20% land, 80% building. Okay. I like to ask the appraiser to say, how much is land and how much is building? Because sometimes it's close, and if it was $1 million property, 20% land, 80% building, so $800,000 is the existing building, you have to then invest $800,000 into those improvements of that site. So that could be an addition, that could be adding other units, that can be just updating all of the electric systems, all of the plumbing systems, all of the HVAC, the whole roof, the windows. So my model of investing is to do just that. I've been in this game a long time. I've had a lot of investors that haven't made it. I've outlasted a lot of them. The number one reason every small business fails, what's the number one reason? Small businesses fail. Yeah. The answer is lack of cash flow, right? Especially in real estate. You make money for 5 years and then boom, big capital item, and now you gave it away. And the challenge is you're giving it away from your own cash flow. You're not going out and refinancing the building because you need a new roof. But if you think about it this way, I like debt on this asset class because I want to put in some ways the least amount of my own money up front. I want to leverage the bank's money, and I want to do 30 years of CapEx in day one. And I have some examples as to why I could argue that that's almost one of the only ways to do it. All right. Once you double your basis and you do all your improvements, you order your cost segregation study. All that means is you're going to take an engineering firm and you're going to break up what's the 5-year, 15-year, and 27.5-year property. And there is a DIY cost seg. I've done that before. So for the smaller ones where you're not going to want to spend thousands of dollars, DIY cost seg has worked for me.
Is that when would you do a DIY versus that?
I would do a DIY for like a single family home,
Yeah,
or maybe a
that's
duplex.
Yeah.
Beyond, definitely anything commercial I would recommend.
Okay.
Yeah.
And an engineer firm would do that.
It's we use the one that we'll show is called Madison Specs is the one that we use, but you can shop around for those. And you can get free proposals from those. And you can say, hey, this is what I'm buying. This is my renovation budget. Why don't you tell me what this looks like? And then they also help you because these tax rules change. When was it put in service? So that's a different component of the but I use it in tandem with the QOZ. Then you execute, like you have to lease, manage, and maintain these, right? Because you're there for 10 years. So you gotta, you're committed to it. You help the community grow. You sell to another investor after 10 years. Okay. Now we're going to get into some of these details. Any questions so far? Yes.
Is it okay or advantageous if it is a mixed-use property?
From the question is it advantageous if it's a mixed-use property? I'm going to share from my own experience, a lot of these areas where they're QOZ areas, the mixed use is probably the mixed part of it, right? So meaning commercial typically downstairs and residential upstairs, you're going to have the biggest challenge leasing and collecting rent on the first floor commercial.
I mean, if it was a laundromat or an educational thing or a daycare or something that would fit in the neighborhood.
Yeah. If it's a laundromat, daycare, right? So what I would say on those is you might better get a deal to pencil, and as opposed to having the laundromat do a big tenant outfit, you do the tenant outfit for them and then bake it into the rent. That helped you get to be able to double your basis.
Sorry, say that?
So you have a white shell and a laundromat wants to come to you, right. And you knew this really ahead of time. Well, instead of the laundromat putting in $100,000 worth of leasehold improvements, maybe you as the landlord do that, right. And then you build it into the rent. That helped you increase your basis. Because some of these get close. You don't want to over-improve, but you need to be on the threshold of doubling the basis. Otherwise, it's a non-qualifying asset. If you have a higher percentage of non-qualifying assets, it can nullify your entire fund.
So it has
So-
to be double plus $1.
Double and a dollar, and you have to know what you're doing on, like, where do you spend these money. So a lot of where we get involved from the consulting is like highly detailed scope of works to get into, like, this is what you need to do in what order and what are the real amounts. Because once you get into 5 and 10 and 20 unit buildings, like, those costs kind of change than what you might be used to in a single family where you're doing more of that work yourself. Potentially where we all get started. Yes?
Is there a cap on the scale price? The more, like a multi-million-dollar project, do they cap it? Or do they say, it doesn't matter as long as you double your basis?
As far as I know, there's no cap on this. So one of the best things to do would be taking raw land and where there is no basis because it's just the raw land, and then developing. That's really, I mean, that would be the velodrome in Coatesville. Getting that whole site, redeveloped. Yeah. Okay. So have your fun. Make the purchase. Double the basis. So you have to do all that within 30 months. So there's times that has to be done. And after the property's done, you order the cost segregation study. You must hold for 10 years. We've covered that. Some people say it's 7 years from rehab. It's 10 years from post-rehab. What I understand is it starts when you invest into the QOZ. So I actually have like maybe 7 years left, even 5 years left on some of my. It goes fast. 10 years in real estate and life goes fast. Really does. After those 10 years, you can elect to get the stepped up basis. Basically, as if your heirs inherited the property and they get the stepped up basis. So that's how it ends up happening. And then there's zero capital gains tax on the appreciation, and there's zero on the add back of the depreciation. So we'll start getting into some numbers here. Accelerating. So after the cost seg study, I think we've covered that, where the engineer or the DIY, you break it down into what is considered 5-year property. So like carpet. Carpet's 5-year property. So what percent of what you bought is carpet, right? Hardwoods might be 15-year property. Okay, so it's different than 5 years, right? Different, the laminates, and there's even like what part of the door, and there's a lot that goes into it. They get really granular, okay? But you get one of those studies done. What I've seen is if I have $1 million worth of real estate, about 35% is able to be depreciated in a really good tax year in year one. That's just a general rule of thumb that I found. Call it 30 to 40%. I use 35. So what's really nice about that is the challenge with real estate is if you did it conventionally and you put 20% down plus closing costs, you're into it for, you buy $1 million worth of real estate, you're into it, or your investors are into it for $250,000. But that's not an expense year one. The $1 million building that you bought is not an expense year one. Just the cost basis divided by 27.5 years. So it's a very small amount that's actually an expense in that year. So our federal government encourages us taking out debt. It encourages leverage, and now it encourages these accelerate the depreciation, so that therefore it better balances what the cash outlays are versus how you're getting taxed. Otherwise, you can really get ahead of your skis on a lot of this stuff and not have the cash to pay the tax bill. The accelerating allows you to generate large year one losses. For some of us, we qualify for REPS, which is real estate professional status. That's 750 hours per year in real estate activities, and there's qualifying activities, and more than 50% of your working time must be in real estate. So what does that mean, Rob? Well, that means if you have active income, but you qualify legitimately for this rep status, your passive losses on the real estate could help offset your active income. And that does qualify if you file jointly. So maybe one spouse has a big W-2 and the other spouse qualifies for the reps and does the investing. So my mentors always taught me it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you keep. Dave Ramsey part that he loves is it out of how much you keep, how much debt can you take on to build assets. Dave Ramsey doesn't like that.
That's the wrong snowball.
That's the wrong snowball. Okay. So once you do that, loss can offset the active. Losses can also just carry forward on it, right? So maybe you had some investors, and maybe they qualify in that status, and that maybe they want to, or maybe that's where it comes into having a certain amount of non-qualified assets in with the qualified assets, and like you can get pretty complex with this. Like I invested about $7,500 to get all this set up between the consulting and the legal paperwork and all that. Beyond that, it has not cost me a lot of money with my CPAs to keep me current. So that was the investment I made. Maybe that's going down with Perplexity and ChatGPT and everything else.
Can you keep one QOZ LLC and have multiple underneath that one? Or does that QOZ LLC have to own only that one?
So the question is, can this own more than one of these entities, and can these entities own more buildings? So the way I've structured it, I have this entity owns 2 buildings with this one fund, but I could do another one over here.
But that, and like, so it doesn't have to be like Chester County only. You could go to any of the opportunity zones and invest.
Yeah, this is just a name that I do to help keep organized.
Yeah. And then the underneath, the properties that you own underneath, if they're not in a QOZ, is that okay as well?
If these properties underneath here, that's when you get into, that can be a major problem.
You want multiple.
Yeah, so this will only own QOZ properties.
Inside or in their own separate LLCs underneath?
In this, being that's 99% owned by the fund, this is only for QOZ activities. I don't recommend doing the redevelopment 1 and 2 and 3 because you will just get confused as to what is what. Who's a partner in this one? What's that one again? Like, yeah.
What's involved with starting the fund?
Yeah, paperwork. Legal. It is legal paperwork. I think I don't quote me here. It's what that structure is. I'm not quite sure, but it does have its own tax return. You are reporting on it. You have its own bank account. Here's the $100,000 that this investor and that investor. It's really clean accounting. This is it now putting over to this entity, right? Now that entity is getting like the loans and all that. That's all dealing with that entity. That's not so much the QOZ. So there's not, the way we've structured, there's not very many transactions. They're all very clean transactions. So like, business sold. Okay, the money goes in there. We'll start the clock. That has to be invested within 30 months. Right? And there's penalties if you don't start deploying it fast enough. So you got to move it over to the entity that's actually spending the money, which in that case is that entity down here. So like the gains go in here, and then this funds the operating, think about the operating entity, and then that's the one where the construction draws are going in and it's paying for everything, right? So this stays pretty clean. You want to keep that pretty clean.
And that is a specific legal entity. It's not just get an LLC. I'll give you $100.
That's right, and it's not.
Get something special.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and it's not just I'm going to name it QOZ, because it does get into how do you file your taxes. I didn't realize this the first time I did it. I bought an office building for $90,000. I put $100,000 into it. It was worth $350,000 when I was done, at least the appraisal. Right now, if I sell that building in 10 years for $400,000, my basis is next to zero because I've depreciated it, and I will be paying a capital gain on $400,000. At what, 30% blended? So $120,000. What? All because I didn't file the, So like that's why I wanted to come here. And like these are all in our backyard. And that was a $90,000 purchase. Like there's houses for 90 grand out there that you could very easily invest $100 a square foot. Like very easily. If you want to front load your roof, your heater, your windows, all your sidewalks and your stairs and like fix your foundation and like get a really good tenant in there and then set up the lease on a 3-year cost of living adjustment and forget about it for 10 years. There you go. Now you bought it for 100, you put 100 into it, maybe you got lucky in that area and it's worth 400. So if it doubled in 10 years, rule of 72 would say that's like 6% annual appreciation. There's some markets that are going to go up 6% a year. There's some that are going to go up 2% a year. So that's the power of this, especially when your income in 10 years might be more. And you got other incomes coming in, now you're pushing up these tax brackets, or their federal government can always change what their add back of depreciation right now is 25%.
Another random.
Yeah.
Sorry,
It's great. It's great.
Do you have to? You said you think you have to have like 2 owners. So that QOZ LLC has to be owned by individuals, or can it be owned by another LLC?
Let me jump. Wait.
I always ask questions from further on in the presentation.
Yeah, let's get back there. We'll get there. We'll get there. I think I have some. There's dude. We got 100 slides to go. Does anybody need a bathroom break?
It's not a terribly important question, but
All
I just was curious because you mentioned the.
And I structured mine with a partner from the beginning, so that didn't even come up with us.
Attorney.
Yep.
So.
And the way and the whom I recommend, he's both a CPA and an attorney.
Love that. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. And we've covered this. They are meant to revitalize distressed areas, create jobs, improve the housing top, increase local activity. It's an investment strategy and a community development strategy. 1,000%. Hold it for 10 years, sell the property, zero capital gains. We talked about the rule of 72. You can Google that, how that works. It's just like kind of cool math, right? So like 10% appreciation, and like compounded is the property doubles in 7 years, 8% it doubles in 9 years. Just the power of compounding. Yeah, we covered these. Now, I don't believe that Pennsylvania doesn't love real estate investing. Well, actually, it loves it because it collects a lot of revenue from it, but it doesn't necessarily like participate. So this may not change like what you owe locally or what you own like to the state. Okay, so here are some hypothetical projects, right? This is a building before and after. So it's, if I know I'm doing a QOZ and I need to invest some money, I'm not dealing with old fire escape, right? This is actually the main set of stairs. So this winter, right, we did pretty well. Like we had some deep freezes, like polar vortexes. We had a lot. It was a gnarly winter in Pennsylvania in 2026, right? So what I like about an asset class like this is I bought this from an investor who wasn't making money. They weren't making money. The tenants weren't real happy. Because when you're not making money as a landlord, you're not having money to do any type of proactive repairs, let alone many of the things that are really needed. And then it's just not a great environment to be. So this one qualified. I think it was purchased for about $750,000 and $750 or more was put into it.
How many units were in it?
It's 10 and it remained as 10.
For $750,000. Good job.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, they're getting harder to come by. A lot now are trying to be minimum $100,000 per unit. Now the challenge is if I buy it for $100,000, my basis per unit is $80,000, right? Which means I have to put another $80,000 into it. So now I'm into an apartment for $180,000. You can build a new apartment for $180,000, not including some of the site work and the land. So you really do you want a 100-year-old building that you renovated in 2000, who wants to look at that listing in 10 years? It's 2036. The building's brand new in 2026, or the building was built in 1906, renovated in 2026? No, you want the newer one. So you start to get into these ratios where, especially once they're over $100,000, and then in some areas like a Westchester doesn't need to be a QOZ because you're paying $300,000 per unit right now for a 1-bedroom unit in Westchester. Well, you can't put $250,000 physically into a 1-bedroom to double the basis. So it wouldn't matter because it's not a QOZ. It doesn't need that level of revitalization. James, you had a question?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
what about, I guess what I was wondering
Yes.
is, if you're putting that, you're saying you have to double the basis in the first 30 months,
Mm-hmm.
some way or the other. So whether it's through financing or out of pocket, is that even got a cash flow to, do you know what I mean? Like, you have to pay the bills every month,
Yes.
not just play the long,
Yes. So the question is, how do you do that from a financial, energetic, and cash flows and all that? My answer is very carefully, which is why RW Investments exist, honest to God.
Okay. So
Because you
that's
need to
your-
know, how do you do this? That was an 80% occupied building that we bought. There's 2 original tenants still in the building. Well, how did you do that? How did you renovate that around them? And then I did use construction loans where you're paying interest only. Well, I think I'm going to get the renovations done in 9 months. Yeah, great. Ask for 18 months interest only period, right? Because maybe you're doing permits. And what happens with your permits? And what happens to you? Does your tax bit change? Okay, now, one way that this is pretty successful for me, and I think, Matt, you might also be set this way in other people, is it doesn't take much to be a licensed general contractor in Pennsylvania. So if that is a legal entity as a general contractor, and let's say that's a 15% profit margin, so $150,000 of actual labor and materials ran through a general contracting company would be what's 15% of 500 is 150. So that's invoicing the QOZ for $650,000, paying out $500 in labor and materials. It helps a little bit. That extra 15% GC fee does help. Or you're paying it out to a GC anyway. But if you're the one showing up there and that's part of your qualified status and all that, that does help to make the numbers work. I am usually doubling the NOI when I'm done with the project. So $800 apartment that I fully renovated is now $1,600, and I do not pay for water. I do not pay for any I don't pay for any utilities. I think I have some pictures in here that shows everything gets sub-metered, the heat gets changed around, landscaping gets made easier to do. So not a lot of mulch. I'll spend the money to do river rocks. River rocks, just pull the weeds a few times a year. Get the landscaper not to blow all the grass into the stones, and that does help with that. And now we're not paying for mulch every year. Also, mulch can burn. I had it happen at a beach house, actually. Mulch can catch on fire. So those are the types of things I'm doing, James. So I'm dramatically reducing operating expenses. Usually when you buy that building, landlord's paying for heat. Landlord's paying for a lot of the, even some of the electric, right? They're definitely paying for the water and the sewer. So every time that toilet's running, it's a $4,000 bill, they're paying for it. We come in and we change all those systems, and that debt, so what's $750,000 stretched out over 30 years amortized, 25 years amortized. So it's definitely a velocity of money that you need to understand that. What are you paying for monthly? What are your rents doing? Your debt is hopefully fixed for as long as you can, and hopefully you're getting 2 to 3% rental increases.
So is there any worry or component about, you're making the building beautiful and cleaner, better looking, increasing in property values all around, but now you're doubling the rent? Is that, some people would argue that, are you really helping the community by now having an apartment that costs twice as much?
That's right. That's right. So that would be the term for that would be gentrification, right?
I'm just curious if you got any pushback.
Yes, you will definitely get some pushback on that. That's right.
That's what they're hoping for with our opportunity
Yeah.
zone almost.
I mean, that's,
I mean,
It's just named
yeah.
different.
It can also be a different avatar that's like, there's areas where people will spend more money because everything works, it's brand new, it's well insulated, it's less to operate, it's safer materials and all that.
Everybody else around you can afford it too, so you're of like mind.
Right.
With your neighbors.
That's right. So I've been well received into the communities that we've done these. And I will do the same level of rehab even if it's not a QOZ.
Yeah.
That's the only way that I will invest. I just want everything new. Well, why, Rob? Well, because otherwise I do not know what my cash flows are going to be. And if you're a real estate investor, this is just the dance of money. It's really what it is. And my job is just to predict as far enough ahead for what the velocity of money, what it's going to be.
So because you spend everything up front, you need to put as much aside for maintenance and all that stuff because you're thinking,
You got it.
I already spent it.
When I'm looking at these buildings and they hit the MLS or they're off market and I see $10,000 in rents, forget how many units it is, just 10,000 in rents. The typical building on the left, you will be trained, if you go through any of the syndication courses, to put 10% vacancy in collections and then 50% for operating expenses. And then that will give you your net operating income. And it is scary how close that is. And then from your net operating income, you can then very easily determine what the value of that building is. A lot of the stuff that we see hit the market is the asking price is well north of that equation that I just gave you. For the smaller the building, the worse it is. When you get into these bigger asset classes, no, that becomes what it is. It's trading for a certain cap rate because it's more of a commodity. So what I'm able to do is the building on the left is 10% vacancy in collections all day long, sometimes more, right? The building on the right, I run at 95% what's called economic occupancy. So that's a measure higher. Economic occupancy says, what is the rental rate in your area by square foot or by bedroom? What are you charging in relationship to that? And how much of that rent are you collecting? So economic occupancy looks like this. A $1,000 apartment, that's the market for this asset class, $1,000 a month. If you're charging $950 a month, you're already starting at 95%. The best you can do is 95%. So it's an equalizer to say, well, I'll be 100% occupied and everybody will pay because I'm going to charge 80% of what market is. So when you look at these buildings, it's like, yep, landlord has no vacancy in collections, tenants have been here for years. Yeah, it's probably under market. And I actually think that's a disservice a lot of times to the residents as opposed to, look, let's keep a 2.5% increase. Can you budget for that? Can you plan for that? Maybe put some pressure on your employer, right? Or find a little side hustle or do something like that. Because then when the building gets sold, they're not going from hundreds of dollars under market per rent. And now they got to go find a new place to live if they can't catch up. My oldest tenant's Ernie. He's 96 years young. He's under market. That's cool. I have some tenants who have autism and like no family, well under market. Now I'm also not going into those apartments and putting brand new cabinets, granite countertops, all new everything. Too much of a disruption for both of them to be able to move out. I've done that before. I've taken an 80-year-old, 70-something-year-old with 4 cats that was in an oversized apartment. I moved her to an Airbnb that we owned. We cut her apartment in half, fully remodeled it. She picked the exact part of the building that she wanted to live in because we cut all the apartments in half. We took 800 square foot irregular 2 bedrooms and made them all studios or 1 bedrooms, 400 square feet, micro apartments. She's still there today. Absolutely loves it. Her rent did go up. I doubled my rent per square foot and I made the building pencil. Now to your point, James, I have this business model that I'm sharing with you at that level, you have to be comfortable with debt. because there's going to be a lot of it, and I can't lock in this debt on these asset classes for 35-year like amortizations. And it's more like, we'll give you 10 years fixed and a 5-year reset.
Because they're more than 4 units?
They are in a valley of, they're not, I'm not putting, so when you get to, when you're buying a home and you're buying a duplex, and I think even up to maybe a 4 unit,
Right.
you can get, they get packaged up and they get sold.
You get residential.
And you can get them fixed for 30 years.
Right.
Right? And they're full recourse, fixed for 30 years, no rate resets. Then you go into this valley, and the valley is, they're not packaged and sold. They're held by local lenders that need to know what the treasury is. And their own, the longest that I've ever had was 10 years fixed interest, which after 10 years, you're trying to recapitalize this thing anyway, for the most part. But usually the rate resets in 5 years. They're amortized over 25. And then when you get north of that, that's why I call it a valley, is when there are companies like Walker Dunlap and others that then Fannie and Freddie will buy those loan products. Those start about $1.5 million in debt. If it's a very competitive market, you're not even getting callbacks from those brokers to handle those transactions because they're paid a percent of the deal. That's $15 million, $50 million, $500 million tranches that they're working on. But you can, those are non-recourse loans. They can be fixed for long periods of time. The new building, right, the one that we did, Royersford Commons, that's going to qualify for a really, really good loan. Non-recourse, 35-year amortizations. Well, it can do that because it's a brand new building. So that roof is not going to need to be done in the period of that loan. Those HVAC units will have 15 years on. That elevator will be good. So there is strength in getting bigger. Now the downside of that building is like now you're more tied to the market. Like I like these medium-sized ones because it doesn't cost me the same amount that a new building costs. So I can be more competitive with my rental rate per square foot, and I don't have all these amenities to keep up with, like dog parks and playgrounds and pools and pickleball and like, you know, the gym and the bagel service and all that. That's a different world. We good on this? Here's another project. Like that one. Has a really good neighbor across the street.
Thanks. 2 times.
Spring City?
That's Coatesville. It's Second Ave. This burned. That's no longer there. That would have been a great QOZ. You just drive that 1,000% QOZ. I would have loved to redevelop that building.
Is it just
Can
gone?
you redevelop the property?
What's that?
Is the property vacant so you can just start?
This one or this one?
The one that burned down there.
It's gone.
Yeah, now it's just dirt. And it has like a price tag for $1 million on it.
What?
Yeah.
Wrong guy owns it.
Wrong guy. Full disclaimer. No.
Nah, wrong guy.
No, wrong guy. Yes.
In that scenario where it burns down, did it damage your building, and would damage repairs cause any effect on this? Like adding to your basis, doubling it and all that kind of stuff, or do you have to double?
I believe the basis would get more because if I would have had to put in some sort of an insurance claim. Yeah, good question. So thankfully it didn't go in like a raging fire, but it was enough for like the roof to collapse more, and then eventually it was just unsafe and you know, to have, and then it was demolished. It's part of this parcel right back here, if you can see that apartment building right there. So it's like this L shape, has parking and all. So. Yeah, so this is a building you can see. It has still window units, so I did not put in central air conditioning, right? So it wasn't like, I'm not going to over-improve something. Mini splits are in some of my buildings and not in others. We ended up putting lighting on and then a canopy. That's kind of like our signature. This is what our mechanical areas look like when we're done. So it's a gut renovation, but we're not replacing every joist and every stud and every piece of plaster, but like it's all new drain lines, all supply lines. These are where our water meters go, and then new electric. Also, my thinking is like all that stuff's going to be just so much more expensive in the future. Not to get started on how data centers work and how much water they use and electricity, and like soon when they go into an area, you're going to see like all the trades that are working retail get vacuumed into these data centers, and it's going to cost you a whole lot more for all your trades. So good for the men and women in the trades. Bad for the consumer. Okay, so let's look at some scenarios. It's my first time looking at this slide. We decided, my ops manager and I decided to do this slide about 4:30 today. So I'll just let you take it in as I take it in as well.
Front load versus delayed.
Front load versus delayed. So the way I look at it is, yes, you can buy that house for $100,000. And yes, you could probably clean it up, paint it, and then move a tenant in there. Right? Now you got a 100-year-old house that you bought for $100,000 that's really never been renovated. So it's probably going to be an oil burner. The roof has probably been getting patched for the last 15 years. Right? The windows are older and drafty. Right? Maybe somebody threw down some luxury vinyl plank and like didn't really install it really well and like get it. You've seen this? Like they really didn't get it. There's no floor leveler, right? But just throw down some plank. My own personal experience with that asset is good luck figuring out what your cash flows are going to be over the next 10 years. You might do really well for the first 2 or 3 with the tenant that you first placed. And then the challenge is when they move out, depending on how well they took care of it, can be pretty significant unit turn costs. And then what if the roof starts leaking? Are you going to just keep patching it, or are you going to replace it? Is that roof $5,000 or $6,000 right now? Right? Well, if you had $2,000 a year cash flow, but on year 4, $6,000 brand new roof, well, you're not going to go to the bank to refinance the property to get the $6,000. That's coming out of your cash flow. But you spent some of that cash flow because you're a real estate investor now, and now you're going to go on a vacation or a cruise. Or you buy another one. The more properties I buy, the tighter I get. And the more life insurance I buy. That's how I do it. But I'm thinking of 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road. So me personally, I like to front load all of what I do. So I like to buy the assets that are as close to their end of the useful life as possible. And then I've done it the way that I know that it's been done. And then the economic occupancy is higher and the operating costs are way down. And your tenant is much happier because they don't want you in their apartment. They don't want to deal with any stuff. That's why they're renting. Cool. Some examples of doubling the basis, year 1 depreciation. So is a 300 purchase, call it like a $600,000 rehab, you're in it for $855, and that year 1 deduction was $250,000. It's pretty powerful. And that doesn't get, there's no adjusted basis, there's no add back on that because this is a QOZ. Because otherwise you're just taking the deduction now from depreciation to then kicking it down the road, which still makes sense from a time value of money,
right.
But you're just kicking it down the road. That's why you have to 1031 and keep 1031 and keep 1031, and in that it follows you. You just got 1031 until you die. Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
The 1031 doesn't stop you from getting the depreciation clawback, though, does it? Or does it? I don't know. That's a question.
No, it goes into the next building. Is how I've never personally done a 1031,
Okay.
but you're not paying a tax bill on your add back of the depreciation with a 1031. Your appreciation and your debt, and it's all about those ratios. They go into the next building, like you carry it forward. Cool.
That's
So,
the blue one.
yep, this is the blue one. Well, they're both blue. That was actually this one.
My neighbor.
Yes.
Yeah.
This one. That's what I meant.
That appraised for $1.5 million. yikes, only 6 units. $1.5 million because of how I structured the leases, right? They were 4 and 5 bedrooms. Now, you got to be real careful. That probably would not sell for $1.5 million.
How many units?
Only 6. You're not paying $220,000 for that. Now, thankfully, I don't. So I do not have financing on $1.5 million because all I needed was $900 to come out. So this is a big league burr. If you do this, so that's the event. If you zoom out big picture, you're putting a gain in from some other property. You're deferring that. Now you get a big 1-year deduction once your project's done. And I think if you structured it right with your entities, you might be able to have you that carry forward loss help you with that gain. Help you with the gain from when you sold the property to put into the fund. Again, all about the velocity of money with this stuff, but you can do this on a single family. Doesn't need to be a 6 unit, doesn't need to be a 10 unit, it could be the land. It could be a building that has enough land on it. That other building, right? There's enough land there for me to build a 6-unit building. Now I'm over my time period. Now I could still do it, but it wouldn't qualify as part of some of that QOZ. And I didn't think it was going to look good for the community to like stick this.
Parcel and it doesn't get its own time stamp.
Or maybe I could do something like that. Split the subdivide.
Parcel and
Yeah.
start over.
Yeah, that's right. So, execution really matters. Not every deal qualifies. Operational discipline. Asset management drives these returns. The deals don't fail, the operators do. You really need to watch your cash on all this stuff as you're scaling up these portfolios and doing the larger scale rehabs. This is our platform for Rentwell tenant placement, the bookkeeping, the rent collection, coordination, all the license and inspections. We have investors literally all over the world, in almost every continent, that are true investors between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, the 2 markets that we operate in. Okay, so let's talk about some of the risks. So the risk is not doubling the basis. So if the land is worth more or the land is worth less, you actually want the land to be worth more when you buy because that way your basis is lower because land's not included. So that's why I like to have the appraisal say, what is the land? Because I also don't want to get challenged if I'm really close. Because if it doesn't qualify, it doesn't qualify. If the basis was $650 and you spent $635, you don't qualify, and that's a non-qualifying asset in your fund, and that can mess up your entire fund.
So who decides that?
The appraiser would decide the value of the land.
Somebody from that manages the QOZ looks at your paperwork and says, sorry, pal, denied?
No, because it's all self-reporting.
Okay.
So it would be being challenged on it in 10 years when you have a $2 million gain that you don't owe any taxes on.
And then that's when
you get challenged on it, and then you go back to the appraisal and said the value of the land was this $150. I bought it for $750. My basis is $600. I got receipts that show $750. Just like somebody else was challenged for having their children work for them. And sometimes it's fraud and it's not, and they didn't really do it. And then somebody else can show, well, I got 50 YouTube videos and 10,000 views. There's child actors out there. My children are child actors. So I'm just like, you don't need to scam the system, just follow the rules. Right?
When you get something appraised, like it's like, I guess like all appraisals like the same, like with like a different guy, like you have 2 different guys appraise it, like do they come in the same value all the time? Or is
No.
that would be like
darn it, a wall.
Yeah, so
That's a whole nother topic.
yeah. So
As much art as it is science.
It's subjective.
Well, the smaller the asset class, single families, more subjective. Duplexes, little less subjective. You get into a 10-unit building and here's the cap rates and here's what your net operating income is, you're within, I land 3 to 5%, except for one property that I was managing for somebody, let them sold, and I was off by what, 150 grand there, Matt, what I thought it was worth to your advantage. So it's actually it's really based upon what's the prevailing cap rate in the area, what's the actual income, because you're basically buying the stream of cash flows. Net operating income means the stream of cash flows.
I've always wondered this. Where's the prevailing cap rate determined? Like, is there an official governmental body or reporting body that says the prevailing cap rate for Coatesville is 8.27%?
So the question is about cap rates.
Yes.
So cap rates vary by asset class. It varies with the bond market and the treasury market, and it's a measure of if you own the property for cash and you had no debt, what return are you getting? So that's what the cap rate is. So the building will have a cap rate, and then a region will have a prevailing cap rate. And that gets easier to calculate on larger buildings when there's more transactions, because that says what an investor is willing to buy.
Right.
Because they're buying a stream of cash flows. The investor's buying it ultimately. The market, the
It's kind of like
add up all the buildings and figure out what the prevailing cap
Yes,
rate is?
yes.
So who
yes.
does that?
That is larger scale commercial brokers. That Marcus and Millichaps of the world, they have all the data, the Crexes of the world.
So you would ask
Yes, so you could go in there, and I've asked ChatGPT for this asset class. You have to prompt it properly. What is the prevailing cap rate? So a Westchester right now.
A lot. You better make sure that that number you're counting on is real, because that, right, your NOI and the cap rate determines your value.
Yes,
right?
ultimately, your loan is going to get up to a certain amount. It's not the cap rate. It's called the debt service coverage ratio. So that's where you can have a cap rate right now. There's a building that's going to hit the market in Westchester. It's going to probably sell at a 4 cap, which means that $1 million that you're going to spend on that, you're going to have an NOI of $40,000. Okay, it's actually going to be less than that. That doesn't mean that a bank's going to give you 80% of that building because you won't, as a loan, because you won't even be able to cover the mortgage. So you have to put more money down because it's an investment. So the higher the cap rate, it means the more risk. The investors want a higher return. So these areas where the QOZs are, they will typically trade for a higher cap rate. But the ultimate of when you do the Burr model and you're going to put the new debt on it, that building could have appraised for $2 million. But the bank is only going to lend you about 30% above what your net operating income is. I'm sorry, below. So if your net operating income is $100,000 per year, that's your free cash flow if you didn't have debt. That's net operating income. So you've paid for pest control, common area cleaning, landscaping, snow removal, unit turns, property management, maintenance, Wi-Fi if you have it, right? You've paid for all that. Taxes, insurance. So what's left is your net operating income. A bank is going to lend you, depending on what the loan is and all, they're going to calculate what either your monthly or your annual payments are. And they're going to only lend you within a certain range of what your actual free cash flows are. So that's really becomes the limiting factor.
Okay.
So you do not need to be an expert.
Almost like DTI.
Debt to income?
Yeah. Well, I mean, debt service to income.
It is debt service.
Debt service to income sounds like.
That's right. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Now the DSCR loans that you get,
It's a little different.
that's just like they're saying, what's your taxes and insurance? But they want more of a buffer. Because they know you're lying or you're doing it yourself. I self-manage. Okay, well, like, sure. And I do my own snow removal, landscaping, and my children do the cleaning, and that's fine. Just like, what's your taxes, what's your insurance? They're going to want more of a buffer than the commercial loans that I get. Some of these ones on a newer asset, they're going to say, we need a 20% buffer. That's pretty low. So if your vacancy goes from 95 to 85 because there was a death, an eviction, a real nasty snowstorm, and nobody wanted to rent, then you might get into those, you get a little closer. It's less of a cushion. Does that make sense? So yeah, don't need to be an expert in cap rates. I've never been able to buy a building and buy it based upon a cap rate when I've been buying them. It's because everything that I'm buying is I'm changing the numbers. I'm fundamentally changing the numbers anyway.
Right, I guess I was just thinking ultimately that's going to be your ARV is based on
Yes.
what your projected in NOI is.
Amen. That's it.
That's what your ARV is.
That's it.
So
that's why the appraisals all come in about the same.
My point was knowing what the prevailing rate is. You can
Yes.
use that in your, like you might do better,
That's right.
but you can kind of count on that if it's.
Yes.
And that's why it was who decides it.
That's right.
Made a difference.
And it's important, ultimately your loan is going to be based on DSCR. Yes, it has to qualify on the appraisal perspective. And I think you just went through that, Matt, right? Didn't it appraise for more? But ultimately your loan was based on a certain amount of DSCR. So he has more equity on his balance sheet. Yeah. And if you invest in real estate, I recommend, and I've done this from one of my early mentors that said, Rob, I just like to, he talks real soft and real slow, or that's his soul. He says, I just like this. I said, how do you know if you're being successful in all this? And I just like to see that the 1 month I'm paying down more principal than the month before. So I track it every month. Because sometimes that's the only positive news I got that month. Honest to God, that's it. Okay, working capital risk, no written plan or missing the 31-month deployment window can disqualify the project. Cash out within 2 years or excess depreciation can trigger taxable gain. Selling before 10 years eliminates the full tax-free. A construction overruns, lease-up delays, poor management. You know, and some of your capital could be tied up for 10 years if you couldn't do the full. If you over-improved and you didn't drive, you need to know what to do to drive earnings. It's like buying a small business. You need to know what to put in there. Experience is what you get just after you needed it. Yeah, buy right, improve, hold it. Everybody wins. I mean, you know, I've actually gotten a call from the borough of the city of Coatesville that just said thank you. That building looks really nice that you did. That felt great. And it I love real estate, right? Because you can really see it. It's very tangible, and then you can be a light, and then hopefully make some other people want to do it. A challenge of this that I will say is you will price yourself out of your own market. Because now you've shown what new prevailing rents can be, and other landlords may not realize, yeah, but like my building has new service cable and a brand new roof and brand new windows and everything else. Oh yeah, but you got X amount for a 2-bedroom, so I'm just going to make it look like yours, but the bones I'm not going to change. And maybe the bones didn't need to be changed. But actually what ends up happening to most redevelopers is that they get priced out of their own market and then they need to go to another market.
You're competing with your previous project.
You're competing with your previous project, and you prove out. And now it's on Zillow. Everybody sees it. It happens. Yeah. Yeah. So that's that. It's the cell. It's the email. It's the QR code. Our mission is to create the opportunity to build wealth and freedom with sound investment, construction, and management services. So stick around. We can have some fun. I'm happy to answer any questions. And yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you for listening to Living Well with Rentwell. We hope you loved that episode.
Please be sure to head over to our website at rentwell.com.
We wish you a blessed day. Thank you for tuning in, and check in later.